Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I'm Brian Nemhauser, and it's a Thursday. I'm going to keep trying to remember the days as they blend together over the summer break. Hopefully, you all are enjoying this short period of time where the Northwest is the best place, I think, on the planet to be. You got 70s, 80s, clear sky, no humidity. It's time to be outside, time to enjoy yourself. Hopefully, you're getting a chance to do that wherever you are. Hopefully, you guys are enjoying your summer as much as I am. And we're heading towards July 4th. That would be tomorrow. Yeah. In fact, that means I'm just remembering my best friend growing up, Sean Beal. How you doing out there, Sean? He turns 50 today. So I got to go out there and make sure I wish him a happy birthday. I'm going to head down to Portland in a few weeks and go golfing with some of my high school buddies, and looking forward to doing that. And today on this episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings, we're going to talk about inside linebackers. We're going to continue our march through the NFC West, every position group, looking at all the players that are going to matter for deciding this division this year. And we're going to look specifically today at a group that used to be, I think, like a strength of the division. It wasn't that long ago that you would look to the NFC West for the best linebackers in football. You're talking Bobby Wagner and KJ Wright and Fred Warner and, Dre Greenlaw. And even further back, you're talking about Patrick Willis and Navarro Bowman. And there's been some great ones. There have been some great ones over the years. And when you look at it now, as we go through it today, I think you're going to be scratching your head a few times about when I tell you who's the starters, not even the depth players, who are the starters for all four teams. I think there's going to be some who did you just say? Because there's some new names, fresh faces, and it's not as strong of a group as it once was. There's certainly some star power, but there's also some evidence that teams are not prioritizing this position the way that they have in the past, as well as just the reality that there just are not as many truly elite inside linebackers or off ball, depending on how you like to talk about them, as there once were. And if you have just been tuning in to any of the series before, you'll see we've done a number of positions already. And we've done wide receiver, running back, tight end, interior defensive line, edge rushers, and cornerbacks. So we're ping-ponging back and forth between offense and defense. Today, we're back to defense, inside linebackers. That will leave us with only one group left on defense, and that's safeties. We still have, on the offensive side, I've broken out offensive tackles from interior offensive line. I'm looking forward to doing that. I think we'll start with one of those tomorrow, most likely. And then we've also got quarterback. So we'll end up with a flourish on the offensive side. But looking forward to doing the inside linebackers today. And the last one I did was running backs. And I got to admit, that was a really much tougher ranking than I expected. I ended up with the Seahawks on top and the 49ers on bottom. And that is controversial for sure, depending on how things play out. That could look really foolish. But as I think about the running backs and the running back position, it is a battle of attrition. And the Seahawks have the deepest running back room in the division, one of the deepest running back rooms in the NFL. And despite the fact that they've got a guy at the top of their depth chart who's been injured a lot, Zach Charbonnet is a starting quality back and performed like that last year when he got the chance to start. So I don't know. I'm going to stick with that ranking even after kind of reflection. And we'll see with the 49ers and Christian McCaffrey, his health. We'll see. We will see. If he does not stay healthy, I just don't. I mean, I think Isaac Guerendo is a fine player. I think the drop off is dramatic from number 1 to number 2 there. I don't think the drop off is as dramatic from number 1 to number 2 in Seattle, and frankly, to number 3 and number 4, maybe even number 5, depending on how you look at it, with the Seahawks. So let's get back to talking about inside linebackers today. And if you're, again, just kind of getting familiarized with how we do this, I'm going to go through and tell you who plays, who's on the depth chart for each team. So we just get to know the names. I'm going to go through and look at some advanced metrics, some different metrics that we can have for evaluating inside linebackers. And one of the things for today there is the inside linebacker position is used in a myriad of ways, right? It matters how they play the run. It matters how they cover receivers and tight ends. And it also, in some cases, matters how good of a blitzer and pass rusher they are. So we're going to look at all aspects of what it means to be an off-ball linebacker. And then I will kind of reflect on everything we've learned together and decide where I think these groups rank. And then I will look at some other third-party evaluations. We'll go to PFF, see what they just did their 1 through 32 ranking of all inside backers. We'll go to Mike Clay, his positional rankings over at ESPN, and we'll kind of sanity check. Am I completely crazy? Am I a total homer for the Seahawks? We will see. So that is the plan. If you haven't already, click like and click subscribe. Click the bell to get notified. Please do. We are up over, what are we at, 21,000 subscribers? I think we have lost track. You guys are crazy and amazing. So, yes, we are over 21,000 subscribers. Would love to get up to 22, 25, 30, all that good stuff. So click the like button and subscribe. Also, go over to patreon.com/hawkblogger. Head over there, get access to our Discord channel. Also, get verified over on hbtix.com. hbtix.com. This is the only place where, as a Seahawks fan, you can list Seahawks tickets to make sure that you sell them to other Seahawks tickets. And as I've talked to you about before, you can see here where people have listed their tickets, and they have a little check mark next to their name because they're also an HB patron. So you can trust a little bit more someone who's subscribed to a Seahawks podcast and show that they are actually a Seahawks fan. And you also, when you find something you like there's full season tickets available, which is wild and very cool. You can go over there and, Keith Thompson's got his seats available. They are 100 level season tickets, and you can message him. You can get access to these and start a conversation to get to Seahawks games and make sure that this home field advantage that we care about so much is preserved. So head on over to hbtix.com and make sure that you verify yourself by being a patron at patreon.com/hawkblogger. All right, let's get familiar with this NFC West inside linebacker group. All right. We're going to start with the division champion Rams. And I'm surprised no one's been annoyed that I keep calling them the division champion Rams, but they are. That's who they are. So they get their flowers until they're not. And the Rams are a team that last year made a decision that surprised me. I was really surprised that they moved on from Ernest Jones before the season started. He was in the last year of his deal. He had played really well for them. He was a very young player. He was a team leader. They traded him away for peanuts. And they went with a group that included Christian Rozeboom, and Troy Reeder was initially their starters, and eventually started moving into a young player that I don't think a lot of people know about. Especially the Rams have a lot of talented young players on the defensive line that get a lot of attention. I would even say their young safeties might get more talk than this guy. But Omar Speights is a player that started for them last year and I thought was a very good player. We'll talk more about why and what stood out to me, but Omar Speights stepped in for them and played pretty well. The Rams also signed as a free agent Nate Landman from the Atlanta Falcons. Nate's a guy that I also when I was scouting the Falcons ahead of the Seahawks-Falcons game last year, I thought there were some good things I noticed about him, and we'll talk about him a little bit as well. They still do have Troy Reeder, and then they have Chris Paul Jr., the rookie linebacker that they drafted, pretty undersized, but a playmaking linebacker. So those are their top 4 inside linebackers, all right? Let's look at the San Francisco 49ers. 49ers have maybe the best inside linebacker in football. Fred Warner is still there. Last year, he started off his game against Minnesota in week 2 was one of the best games a defender played all season. He was unbelievable. To be able to affect the game as much as he did from his position, it was outstanding. Now, I was happy that the 49ers lost that game, but I'm going to recognize how good Fred Warner was. He was a defensive player of the year level player for the first few weeks, and then he got a stress fracture in his foot and played the rest of the season on it, but his play dropped off pretty dramatically after that. So, but Fred Warner, we'll talk about him. He's still, the cream of the crop as far as I'm concerned, and I think many others. The other starting backer that they've currently got listed is D. Winters. And I don't know that many people know who D. Winters is, but he's a starter as of now for the 49ers. We'll talk more about him in a little bit. Nick Martin is a rookie that they drafted, I believe, out of Oklahoma State, if I recall correctly. And we'll see how he does. 49ers have had a pretty solid history of finding really good off-ball linebackers in later rounds. And Nick Martin, they hope, is the next one in that list. The other guy that they've got is Tatum Bethune. And we'll talk a little bit about him as well. But those are the guys that are kind of tops on the depth chart for the 49ers. All right, let's talk about the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona Cardinals, can you name a single starting inside linebacker for the Arizona Cardinals? All right, I'm going to give you a second to see if you can guess the name of one starting inside linebacker for the Arizona Cardinals. It is not Budda Baker. He's not there. He's a safety. It's not, it's not, who was the guy they drafted a few years ago that plays all sorts of positions? I want to say Isaiah something, but he plays for I think he plays for the Giants now. I don't know, but it's not him either. It's not Zaven Collins, if you thought he plays outside for them. We have one person, Steph. Congratulations, Steph. You are correct. Steph guesses Mack Wilson. Mack Wilson Sr. is a starting linebacker for the Arizona Cardinals, as is Akeem Davis Gaither, who was a free agent signed by the Cardinals from the Bengals, I believe. After them, Owen Papeo is there. Papo. I don't know if I'm coming close on that. It's Pappoe, Papo. And then the other guy that I'm interested in that is getting a little bit of love is rookie Cody Simon, a relatively early round pick for the Cardinals. And I think he was a 4th round pick, if I remember correctly, and out of Ohio State. He's a guy that would not shock me at all if he ends up getting starting reps for them. So that's their top 4 in the Arizona Cardinals room. Let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks. Ernest Jones re-signs with Seattle after coming via trade from Tennessee last year, made a big difference for that team, became a key leader for that team, and now is settled in with a longer-term contract. Next to Ernest Jones is Tyrese Knight, who played most of the season as a starter as a rookie last year. He comes into his 2nd season. After those two guys, you've got a lot of question marks, to be honest. You've got Drake Thomas, who's been there for a few years, and Josh Ross, who is primarily a special teams guy, but Mike McDonald knows him from Baltimore. So it falls off in terms of played potential and experience after those top two guys. It is a rather thin position, I would say, one of the thinnest positions on the Seahawks, especially on the Seahawks defense. So that's the round trip around the NFC West of who are the inside backers. You can kind of see that it's kind of slim pickings. It's kind of slim pickings, and you've got a legit star in Fred Warner. I think Ernest Jones is a Pro Bowl quality linebacker. After that, yeah, good luck. Like it's a lot of question marks, a lot of young players that will be asked to step up. And I think it also demonstrates where teams are putting their priorities in terms of draft picks and in terms of free agent dollars. So we'll take a closer look there in just a bit. So let's see what Field Vision Pro, who I've been enjoying using their stuff to kind of walk through and look at some different advanced metrics. Let's see what Field Vision Pro says about some of these backers from last year. And the first thing I'm going to do here is do a 2x2 of yards per coverage allowed per snap. So yards allowed per coverage snap would be another way to say that. So that's your horizontal axis. And then your vertical axis is stops. And this is a counting stat. So I don't love that, but it's basically how many times did you like stop a runner, essentially achieve a stopped run. And that's usually tackling someone close to line of scrimmage. So it's a run defending stat mostly. I think you can also get a stop on a screen pass or something like that, but I think primarily it is a run statistic. So interestingly, as we look at this, Christian Rosaboom, who's no longer with the Los Angeles Rams, ranked number 2 in stops and number 1 in yards allowed per coverage snap. So he goes to Carolina. He's no longer with the Rams. So then from there, the number 2 player in the division last year in yards allowed per coverage snap was Tyrese Knight. I did not know that. I did not know that going into this. That's surprising. And one of the things people really questioned about Tyrese Knight coming out was his coverage ability. They thought he was just a run stopper, but as you'll see when we look at some other numbers, coverage was something he did pretty well, especially as the season went on. After Tyrese Knight ranked 7th in stops, by the way. So 2nd in yards allowed per coverage snap. And then we get to Omar Speights. This is the guy I mentioned before that I thought played pretty well for the Rams quietly and helped that Rams defense become a lot. I think that you can actually look when Omar Speights started for the Rams. That's when I think the Rams defense took a step forward. I think their inside linebacker play was atrocious. And I think Omar Speights was a big part of turning that around. He ranked 5th in stops, and I think that's a counting stat. And so snaps played matters there. He didn't play nearly as many snaps as a lot of these other guys. I would bet if I look at stop percentage, which I will in a little bit over at PFF, I bet he's higher. Yards allowed per coverage snap, he was 3rd. So he was a good coverage backer. All right. Increasingly, coverage is the more important aspect of how you play as an inside off-ball linebacker because so many offenses target the linebacker and trying to put them in conflict with crossing routes, with tight ends, with slot receivers, all sorts of things that really challenge those second-level defenders. So I think that's a pretty important part of this. As we keep kind of looking through, Fred Warner, number 1 in the division by far in stops, but he was dead last in yards allowed per coverage snap. And I'm going to give him a little bit of a pass. I'm going to do this real quick. Let's look back at 2023. Because Fred Warner was hurt a lot of last year, I think that played a big role. It is interesting. We look back at 2023, he was not that much better, to be honest, in yards allowed per coverage snap. And if we look at 2022, so maybe I am overstating, at least in this metric, Fred Warner's numbers. He has some not great numbers in yards allowed per coverage snap. Well, hold on a second. Okay, this is an issue. Okay, everybody, maybe you guys already figured this out. Field Vision Pro has a bug. Okay. Field Vision Pro, I'll have to talk to them about this. They did not flip the axis for yards allowed per coverage snap. Being more to the right is a bad thing in here. This is the more yards allowed per coverage snap is not good. So the fact that Fred Warner allowed the fewest yards per coverage snap means that he was the best coverage. Okay, that makes so much more sense. Okay, I was giving him excuses, but he doesn't need them. He was the best in that. He was the best in both in that regard. So we actually should be reading this in reverse. Okay, so top left quadrant is where is the best. Bottom right quadrant is the worst. So I'm going to have some different things to say about Tyrese Knight and Omar Spates as we look at this. My goodness. Egg on my face for not catching that sooner. All right. So Fred Warner, as you can see here, on his own. I mean, the guy's far and away the best linebacker in the division. I don't think there's any question. Anyone that wants to question that, good luck. Then I'm still laughing about this. Then you get to Ernest Jones. Ernest Jones was third. I'm going to have to read this backwards now. Third in the division and really second out of the linebackers that are still here in yards allowed per coverage snap behind Fred Warner. So Fred Warner was 0.81 yards allowed. Ernest Jones was 0.87. So they were relatively close there. As far as stops, though, Ernest Jones was second, but he had 29 versus 53 for Fred Warner. Very different there. So Fred Warner and Ernest Jones show up as the two best linebackers in this division, at least by these metrics, and that shouldn't be a huge surprise. This all makes so much more sense. Mack Wilson Sr., interestingly, shows up as the third best coverage off-ball linebacker behind Jones and Warner. And he is, let's see, he would be third. Well, we'll say fourth in stops. Yeah, fourth in stops. So Mack Wilson Sr. checks in. The first Arizona Cardinal checks in there. Then we get to Omar Spates as, you know, he was ahead of Mack Wilson in stops, but is pretty far down there in yards allowed per coverage snap. D. Winters, last in stops, but again, I think we might see some snap-related reasons for that. He was reasonably good in coverage. Troy Reeder was right next to D. Winters in both numbers. Tyrese Knight bringing up the rear. Last of these guys in yards allowed per coverage snap, last in stops. Well, not last in stops. Third to last in stops. So that's one way of looking at this. Let's look at missed tackle percentage versus tackles. Let's make sure we got the right. Well, so this is also not the quite right way to have. So this time we've got the horizontal axis is tackles. So to the right is better. But now missed tackle rate is unfortunately not flipped. I'll have to tell them about this as well. The lower your missed tackle rate is, the better. So you want to be in the bottom right quadrant would be the best quadrant here. And the only guy in the division that really shows up there is Ernest Jones. He was third in tackles, second in terms of the guys that are actually still in the division. And he was third in missed tackle percentage. So he had a 11.6% missed tackle rate. So Ernest Jones is the only guy in the bottom right quadrant. The other guy that I would call out here is Fred Warner, who number one in tackles. He was fourth in missed tackle rate. So he had a 15.5% missed tackle rate versus Ernest Jones at 11.6. So Fred Warner did miss a lot more tackles, worth knowing. But that also, one of the things with missed tackle rate is it also indicates your range. There's going to be some times that you can, if you're Fred Warner, you can get to a place to try to make a tackle most guys wouldn't even get to and get some kind of I would say, shoddy missed tackles where it's other guys wouldn't even be there to miss the tackle. So you're kind of getting punished for your range. I would guess that's some of the issue with Fred Warner. Tyrese Knight does better in this number. He was, what would it be? Second among players still in the division in missed tackle rate, only missed 10% of his tackles, and was fourth in total tackles. And then Omar Speights, number one in the division in missed tackle rate, only missed 7.5% of his missed tackles. I think that's worth noting. Mack Wilson Sr., he had the highest missed tackle rate of any linebacker in the division. So I think that's something to be aware of. D. Winters had the second highest missed tackle rate of the guys that are left in the division. So worth kind of knowing that. Let's bring in the Cincinnati Bengals. See where Akeem. Wait, I want to bring in the Atlanta Falcons as well. To get Nate Landman in there. And let's see where those guys show up on this list. So if I'm looking through here, so Akeem Davis Gaither, he missed a ton of tackles last year. He was essentially similar to Mack Wilson in his missed tackle rate. Nate Landman also very high in missed tackles. Let's go back to coverage, though, for a second. Let's go to snaps per reception versus snaps versus target. So let's see. Snaps per target. And I want to make sure we got the right snaps per reception. So I think snaps per reception. So you want the more snaps per reception, the better. It means the less often that you're on the field that you give up a reception, and you want the more snaps per target. So upper right is better. Okay, just want to double check. So Nate Landman shows up here, the new Rams linebacker. Of the guys that are scheduled to be in this division, he would have had the best numbers in both categories last year for Atlanta. So the Rams at a guy that has some real potential as a coverage backer. Ernest Jones is next in that number for guys that are in the division. Then you get Troy Reeder and Fred Warner are in that upper right quadrant. So both of those guys show up. These are all like the best coverage backers in the division. From there, the lower left, there's a lot of guys in the lower left. Mack Wilson Sr. is in the lower left. Omar Speights is in the lower left. D. Winters, Akeem Davis Gaither, and Tyrese Knight is the bottom of the group. He is the guy that, from a coverage perspective, and this is where I was like kind of surprised earlier and giving him flowers when I was like, everyone said he couldn't be a coverage backer and coming out of college. Well, so far they've been proven correct. That's been an issue for him. He is showing up as the worst coverage backer of the guys in the division. All right, so that's kind of a quick pass through some of those stats. And I want to look at some of the PFF numbers. So I talked about run stops, and run stops is a snap related number. It's a counting number. The more snaps you have on the field, the more chances you have to get a run stop. So PFF has run stop percentage. That's a relative, not a counting stat. And so we can see, like, of the chances you had, how many times did you get a stop? Of the guys in the division, the guy that had the best run stop rate was Ernest Jones, 9.5%. And as I kind of go through this number, the fascinating thing is you see some ghosts from NFC West past. You see Azeez Al-Shaair at number 5 on this list, the former 49er who's been gone for a little while. You see Jordan Brooks, the former Seahawk. he is really right next to Ernest Jones. He's got a 9.9% stop rate. Ernest Jones is 9.5. So essentially the same. But as we keep kind of going down this list, Ernest Jones is number 1 in the division. After that, it's a long way to go to get to the next guy. Omar Speights was 32. So Ernest Jones ranked 17th at 9.5%. Omar Speights was 32nd at 8%. Fred Warner was 35th at 7.8%. Akeem Davis Gaither shows up here at 7.8%, same as Fred Warner. Then you get to who comes after that? Nate Landman is at 48 with 7.3%. It's not bad considering, again, Nate Landman looks to be one of the better coverage backers in the division. As we keep going through this list, and we keep going and going and going. Troy Reeder shows up at 71st. Mac Wilson shows up at 74th. Not great. Tyrese Knight shows up at 78th. Also not great. D. Winters at 84th, and on down the list. So this is one that kind of shows Ernest Jones as one of the best run defenders in the division at off-ball linebacker. If we go to coverage and we look at coverage, and we just look at coverage grade for a second, the top coverage graded linebacker in the division is Fred Warner, 88.4 coverage grade. Not a shock there. Makes sense. As we go on past him, the next highest graded off-ball linebacker from a coverage perspective in the NFC West, you kind of have to keep going, but it's Tyrese Knight at 62.5. That's kind of shocking, I got to say. And these are grades, so you never quite know. As we keep going down the list, Nate Landman is a 58.2 graded coverage backer. So they don't love Nate Landman the way I kind of thought he was interesting, an interesting player. They don't love him as much. There's a stat called forced incompletions, and they have forced incompletion percentage, which I think, again, is an interesting one. And if we look at this, D. Winters is actually 4th among qualifying linebackers in forced incompletion percentage. So maybe some hope there for D. Winters as a coverage backer. That was tops in the division. If you keep going down, Omar Speights would be next, 22nd in the division. He's actually tied with Fred Warner. You keep going down and down and down. Troy Reeder, Tyrese Knight is 47th. So he's tied actually with Ernest Jones. Like, neither one of them show up that well in that particular stat. Last thing I want to look at here is just overall grade from PFF. We'll look at the different grades and some different things. We'll look at missed tackle percentage and a couple things there. But Fred Warner, top graded backer, 89.2 grade. After that, it's a pretty big drop off to the next guy in the division. You get all the way down from Fred Warner at 3rd to, my goodness, Omar Speights at 40th, 66.8 grade. Nate Landman had a 65.7 grade. D. Winters had a 66.4. I missed him. Tyrese Knight. So this is one of the things that like PFF grades get rightly scrutinized for. Tyrese Knight had a 64.9 grade. Ernest Jones had a 60.7 grade. So I think Ernest Jones was a better player than that. I think some of these numbers we've gone over indicate that he's a better player than that. The market price that is paid for him indicates he's a better player than that, but that's what they have. The last thing I want to kind of bring up is pass rush and who was good at blitzing and creating pressure. And the pass rush grade right now, if I go through that, the top graded essentially blitzer in the division at this position was Tyrese Knight. He ranked 19th with a 73.3 pass rush grade. He had 10 pressures last year. So that's something I think worth keeping in mind. I'm a little surprised not to see Mack Wilson higher on here. That's, I think, what his strength is for the Cardinals, but I'm not really seeing him yet. Still going down the list. We get to after Tyrese Knight, Akeem Davis-Gaither had a 63.5 grade as a pass rusher, 8 pressures. Fred Warner had a 63 grade, had 7 pressures. They did not use him much in that way. Mack Wilson had a 61 grade. He did have 16 pressures, so he did have a number of pressures, but they didn't give him a lot of credit for being good at it. Ernest Jones had just a 59 grade here and 13 pressures. If you go by total number of pressures, then Mack Wilson was a top 10 backer in terms of total number of pressures. But again, that's snap related. One of the things I want to call out about Ernest Jones is that this was a guy not so long ago, really just 2 years ago, 2023, he had 33 pressures. He had a 78 grade as a pass rusher. I think that this is a guy that now that he is healthy, now that he is in one place and has a contract and a security that way, I expect him to return a little bit more. He was an 82 graded player that year, 90 graded player in run defense. So I think that this is a guy that is going to come back to life in that way as a blitzer and as somebody that that is going to be clearly the second best linebacker in the division. So as we kind of go back through, let's go to the Cardinals. I think that one of the things that's worth being aware of is that Cody Simon, I think, is going to play a big role for. I think Cody Simon is going to play a big role for the Cardinals this year, and so it's a little bit hard to kind of evaluate that group without knowing how he's going to do. And in fact, I'm looking for this article I read this morning from ESPN where they talked about Cody Simon, and they basically talked about the best players from that, or the players that stood out from each team in the division or each team in the NFL. And let me see. I've got to find that first. I want to read this to you guys because it's worth knowing. Assuming that I can find, the article, which is a little bit annoying. That ESPN, I feel like, has the worst information architecture to find stuff. Man, it's like annoying. Yeah, where is it? I don't know. I did see it this morning, and they basically said that the guy that was having the best, that stood out for them, was Cody Simon. And I do think that he is a guy that's going to uplift that group. I think he's a good player, and wouldn't surprise me if he ends up taking over for one of these guys. If I look at Akeem Davis-Gaither and Mack Wilson Sr., these are guys that I think struggle in pass coverage and struggle with missed tackles. I think they need Cody Simon to be a very good player to actually step in and stop the bleeding a little bit there. Mack Wilson Jr. can be a really effective blitzer and affect the team that way, and I think that's valuable. But I don't think you want your off-ball linebacker's primary value to be blitzing. Like, that's going to be a challenge. So I think this is a tough room for them. I do like Cody Simon a lot, but again, it's a little hard to bet on a guy that's never played a snap yet in the NFL. If we look at the Rams, I like Nate Landman. I think he's an above average starting linebacker in the NFL. I think he has the potential to be one of the better coverage linebackers in the NFL. I think that's pretty valuable. I would weight almost coverage skills certainly higher than blitzing, and certainly I think higher than run defense. Omar Speights, I think, is a promising young player. And when I look at Omar Speights, he really started playing for the Rams as a starter in week 10. And if you look at the Rams Let me look at the Rams in week 10, from week 10 on. So the Rams, I mean, they had a couple rough games defensively after that. Certainly the Eagles game was rough for them, and the Bills game was rough for them defensively. But their last what was it? Their last 3 games before they played the Seahawks, or they allowed 14 points to the Saints, 6 points to the 49ers, 9 points to the Jets, 9 points to the Cardinals in 4 of their last 6 games. And I think Omar Speights was a big part of that. This is a team before he had started that allowed pretty much 20 points or more in every game except for 1. So I think he's a good young player and a guy to keep an eye out for. He earned a 77.6 run defense grade last year. And I think he should just get better in his second season. I think that Chris Paul Jr. is talented. He's very undersized. So again, similar to Cody Simon, I like him, but I just don't know. I don't know whether he's going to get on the field, whether he's going to be big enough. I'm not a big Troy Reader fan. So I think they're okay here. I don't think they're great, but I think they're solid here with both their starters are, I think, decent players in various aspects of being an inside linebacker. 49ers, I mean, they have the only true blue chip player in the division in this position with Fred Warner. After that, I'm more interested in Nick Martin than I am in D. Winters. I think Nick Martin has a chance to step up, but I don't know yet. This is a team that had just a few years ago had Azeez Al-Shaair and Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner. You could have argued they had the 3 best linebackers in the division or close to it on the same team. Now it's Fred Warner and really some guys. And it's got to be a little bit of a concern for that team. Devondre Campbell started for them last year. He was so bad that he didn't finish the season with the team. Like, he quit on the team, and he was basically, even when he was playing, he was barely counting as a player. He was not good. So you've seen the 49ers defense struggle when they don't have Dre Greenlaw, and they don't have him anymore. So definitely have the best player in the division. After that, it's really question mark. As far as starters go, I like the Seahawks starters the best combined. Tyrese Knight had some mixed bag numbers, some bottom of the barrel coverage numbers, but then if you look at forced incompletion rate, he was tops in the division. And so, like, a little bit confusing there. Tyrese Knight also had some really good pass rush and blitzing numbers that I think are worth noting, and then is a really good run defender, and he will, should be better in his second season. So in fact, I want to take one quick look. I think that Tyrese Knight, once Ernest Jones joined the team, Tyrese Knight's numbers jumped. So yeah, if you look after Ernest Jones joined, when was that for the Seahawks? I think that was week 8 was his first game with the Seahawks. If I just look, I'm going to do this real quick. Give me a second. Everyone just take a breath. We're going to look from week 11 on, because that's when Tyrese Knight missed a few games due to injury. We're going to look from week 11 on and just see where Tyrese Knight, how he graded out relative to other linebackers in the NFL from week 11 through 18. And if we do that, Tyrese Knight, where does he show up? 32nd, at least by this number. Let me double check that we got the right one. Yeah. And interestingly, he was 18th in pass rush grade. And at least by this, he was 20th in coverage. So his coverage improved a lot. He was a 67.4 coverage graded linebacker during that time. And if we look at specifically at like forced incompletion rate during that time, yeah, he was pretty high up there as well. So anyway, I like the Seahawks starters as a unit. I don't love their depth. And I think you can kind of say that about a lot of these guys. So as I look through this, 49ers, there's no way I can have them anywhere but first. Fred Warner is worth an entire linebacker room. He's a blue chip player. I think any team in the division would trade what the 49ers have for what they have, most likely. The Seahawks are the one team I would question that, because I think Tyrese Knight has a chance to be pretty good, and Ernest Jones already is good. But Fred Warner is like a defensive player of the year level player, and you don't find those other places. So I've got the 49ers as tops in the division. I have the Seahawks as second. I have the Rams as third and the Cardinals as fourth. And I think I feel pretty good about that one. Some of these I've had some questions about. I've gotten a little bit like hesitant, but that's kind of where I have it. I had 49ers first, Seahawks second, Rams third, and Cardinals fourth. See, we've got some super chats. Gingerbread Man says, Greg Bell was talking about seeing Nick Eamon-Worry playing on the inside next to Ernest. Did you witness this? Yeah, I keep seeing people talk about this. I think that's a real misunderstanding of how schemes work and how the team's lining people up. So Mike McDonald has been clear that Nick Eamon-Worry has been tried at nickel. And I think I saw someone else say that another reporter said that Eamon-Worry is not playing nickel. It's also not true. So when you have a big nickel in there, which is what Nick Eamon-Worry has been playing, it looks like a linebacker. He's going to be standing essentially next to the linebacker. He's a second level defender. And when he's on the field, Josh Jobe is off the field. When they're playing true nickel, Devin Witherspoon's inside and Josh Jobe's on an outside corner position. So Nick is not playing linebacker. He's playing second level defender. That's accurate. And there's times he's going to be standing next to Ernest Jones when he's doing that. That does not mean he's a linebacker. And I would also just say that he's still a nickel defender, a dime defender. And if you remember Rayshon Jenkins last year, if you remember Cam Chancellor, like box safeties when they're playing, like how often do people say Cam Chancellor was standing next to Bobby Wagner in a play? Like that happens plenty. That didn't mean that Cam Chancellor was a linebacker. So I'm not counting Nick Eamon-Worry as a linebacker. I think that it's a little hard to define whether to count him as a safety or a corner at this point, but I do count him as a safety, and I'm primarily going to evaluate him in that regard and as part of that position group when we do safety in a couple days. Thanks. That is a great super chat. Thank you, Gingerbread Man, for doing that. Don Hester has given away 5 Hawk Blogger memberships. If you want one of these free memberships to the YouTube channel, just make sure you turn gifting on for your YouTube account. Search Google if you don't know how to do that. And then like, subscribe, enjoy the show, chat, comment, all those things. That's how YouTube decides who gets these free memberships. Thank you, Don, for your generosity. I really, really appreciate it. Try to be a giving and friendly and fun group, and you guys are a huge part of that. All right. So that's where I'm at on my rankings. Let's take a look at where other people are. So we're going to go to PFF rankings for linebackers first. And we're going to, again, this is not whole running linebacker rooms. This is individual players. So they have some tiers, and they basically say Fred Warner is all by himself. He's tier 1. There's nobody else that's in tier 1. Best linebacker in the game. I think that is totally defendable from my perspective. Tier 2, they've got Zach Bond, Bobby Wagner still in there. Good for Bobby. Roquan Smith, Dre Greenlaw. So again, Dre Greenlaw gone. He was a tier 2 backer and not there anymore for the 49ers. Tier 3, you don't get anyone from the division. Tier 4, you don't get anyone from the division. Tier 5, wow. Tier 5, you don't get anyone from the division. Tier 6, wow. You've got Ernest Jones in Tier 6, ranked 30th. Here's what they say about Ernest Jones. In 2024, Jones was graded twice in a 3-month span from the Rams, traded twice in a 3-month span from the Rams, Titans, blah, blah, blah. The constant movement understandably made it difficult to get Jones acclimated to the system, resulting in his lowest PFF overall grade as a pro. Now with an extension in hand, Jones has some security in Seattle. We can hopefully return to his 2023 level play where he earned an 80-plus grades as a run defender and as a pass rusher. That is wild to me. They've got Ernest Jones at 30. They've got Tyrell Dodson, who was cut to make room for Tyrese Knight over him. They've got Robert Spillane ahead of him. They've got Jordan Hicks ahead of him. Wow. Caden Ellis. I don't know, man. They've got CJ Mosley ahead of him. Really? At this point in his career, I don't know about that. All right. So PFF, very low, but I will say there's only 2 NFC West linebackers even listed, and it is Fred Warner at number 1 and Ernest Jones at number 30. So no one else from the NFC West, just to reinforce that it's not a strong part of this division. Let's take a look at Mike Clay's grades for linebackers. And we get the Rams. Oof. He gives the Rams a 2 out of 1 to 10 scale. 2. I mean, honestly, I'm looking to see if there's any. Okay, I see he gave the Dolphins a 1 for safeties. Now that's probably going to change after getting Minkah Fitzpatrick, but there's not a lot of 2s for any position on any team, but he gives the Rams a 2 at linebacker. I think that's a little low. I like Omar Spates. I like Nate Landman. That's pretty low. He gives the Arizona Cardinals a 3. Not much better. He gives the 49ers a 7. I mean, that's all Fred Warner, and I think that makes sense. And he gives the Seahawks a 4. Wow. Gives the Seahawks a 4. I really disagree with that. I could get behind a 6 there, but he's pretty low on them. But he does, for what it's worth, he does have a very similar ranking. He has the Cardinals just above the Rams. I have the Rams just above the Cardinals. So, yeah. I'm a little bit surprised at the 4 for the Seahawks in that position. I think it's a pretty good position for them at the starter level, but we'll see. All right. If you haven't signed up at patreon.com/hawkblogger, do so, not only because it's a great place to support the show, but there are still spots left for the Ring of Honor dinner. The weekend before the season opener, we're going to get together for a steak dinner with myself, other folks from the Hawk Blogger crew, as well as Ring of Honor members. It's a limited amount of Ring of Honor spaces that I make available. I think there's 3 still open. If you want one, now's the time to get one, and you can join us for what is an awesome way to start the season and a great way to support the show. All right, folks, that will do it for this episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. Have a great rest of your Thursday. I'm Brian Nemhauser. Take care.